원이에요? 만 원이네, 만 원.
여러분들이 전혀 경험하지 못한 장난감들이 박수를 많이 있습니다. 가서 보시면 깜짝 놀랍니다. 아마 안무를 비롯한 영화 완도가 2층에 박수를 많이 있습니다. 박수. 가서 보시면 깜짝
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The Trump administration is now telling U.S. states to stop full food aid payments to low-income families. This comes as more than 40 million Americans who rely on the food aid began receiving only partial benefits this month amid the ongoing federal government shutdown. The South Korean government and the ruling Democratic Party held a meeting over the weekend and reached a consensus on the greenhouse gas reduction targets, and also decided on measures to reduce the tax burden for income earned from stock dividends. Following U.S. President Donald Trump's approval for South Korea to build a nuclear-powered submarine, Seoul's defense minister said building one will dramatically bolster the country's readiness against North Korea, and added Kim Jong-un would be unable to sleep, not knowing where it might emerge. We begin this morning in the United States, where the Trump administration is ordering states to stop full food aid payments to low-income American families as the economic strain of the prolonged federal government shutdown deepens. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
The Trump administration is directing U.S. states to halt full food aid payments to low-income families, claiming such payments are unauthorized. A new memo from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which oversees the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, has instructed states to issue only 65% of benefits this month. This follows a Supreme Court decision allowing the administration to withhold part of the funding while legal challenges continue. More than 42 million Americans who depend on SNAP began receiving reduced benefits due to the ongoing federal government shutdown, now in its 40th day. Some states, including New York, Massachusetts, California, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, had continued to provide full benefits after a lower court ruling ordered full payments. The USDA memo now demands that those states immediately undo any full distributions and recover excess funds, warning that failure to comply could lead to the suspension of federal administrative funding or penalties for overissuances. Meanwhile, the economic strain on the prolonged shutdown is deepening. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Sunday that while the U.S. economy was fantastic under President Trump in the last 2 quarters, growth for the current quarter could be cut in half if the shutdown drags on.
We had a fantastic economy under President Trump the past 2 quarters, and now there are estimates that the economic growth for this quarter could be cut by as much as half if the shutdown continues.
The comments come as millions of federal workers remain furloughed, while key public services continue to suffer disruptions. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump on Sunday defended his economic policies, touting what he called the dividend of a strong America. He announced that every American, except for high-income earners, would receive a dividend of at least $2,000 per person, crediting his tariff policies for the nation's wealth. Claiming that the U.S. is now the richest, most respected country in the world, Trump called the dividend a reward for the country's economic success. 이승재, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense minister An Kyubek praised the potential construction of a nuclear-powered submarine as a triumph of self-reliant defense. During an interview with local media on Sunday, An said the submarine would become a strategic asset that will dramatically bolster the nation's readiness against North Korea. He also called the domestic construction of a nuclear-powered submarine rational, saying that such a project could be completed within 10 years. An also said that such a submarine would leave North Korean leader Kim Jong-un unable to sleep, not knowing where it might emerge. Now, this comes after U.S. President Donald Trump previously gave Seoul approval to develop a nuclear-powered submarine, but said it would be built at a shipyard in Philadelphia. South Korea and the United States have yet to release a joint fact sheet covering economic and security issues, despite the Korean government earlier saying it would be unveiled sometime last week. For more on what the paper might include, we're joined today by Professor Choi Hyun-jin, professor at the Department of Political Science at Kyung-hee University. Professor Choi, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So it appears the two sides have yet to reach an agreement on the nuclear submarine program. What details might be included in the joint fact sheet?
This joint fact sheet will likely to cover both economic and also security outcome from the recent summit. On the economic side, it should include updates on the tariff and investment negotiation, especially how South Korea's planned $350 billion investment plan will be managed over time. On the security side, the focus will be on three key issues. The first will be on the transfer of wartime operational control from U.S. to Korea. And secondly, the South Korean defense budget, how to increase it raise it up to 3.5% of GDP by 2035. And the last one is the ongoing discussion on the nuclear-powered submarine. I think that the last one, the submarine one, seems to be delaying the release of the fact sheet now. Because as you just mentioned, Seoul wants to build the submarine at home with the nuclear fuel provided by the United States. However, the Washington appears to prefer its construction at an American shipyard, possibly in Philadelphia. But I think that once this difference is settled, we can expect a joint statement and joint fact sheet to be released very soon, perhaps emphasizing that both sides remain fully aligned on joint defense despite the delay.
Right. It seems there are some key issues still left to discuss. And Seoul's defense minister says a nuclear-powered submarine will pose a serious threat to North Korea. What would owning one mean for South Korea's security?
It would be a really big step for South Korean defense capability. A nuclear-powered submarine can stay underwater much longer and move faster and operate more quietly. And that means we can track North Korean submarine and even Chinese one without being detected easily. It also gives South Korea a stronger second strike capability and makes it harder for North Korea to predict our movements. And here, the military term second strike capability is simply speaking a retaliation. Okay? And that's why Minister An Kyubek called it a milestone in South Korean defense, and also it would make Kim Jong-un very nervous. It can also strengthen joint deterrence with Washington. The U.S. will provide support and also technology, while South Korea's new submarine will make the alliance a stronger and more balanced. But however, there is also some possible challenges as well. Seoul needs to be very careful about these new challenges. So this development of new submarine system could trigger a possible arms race with China and Russia, and it could lead to some economic pressure from Beijing. So it is true that it's very important for South Korean defense, but however, it must go with smart diplomacy and stronger preparation for possible backlash.
I see. And like you mentioned, Seoul and Washington appear to have made some progress on transferring wartime operational control, especially with President Lee Jae-myung seeking to finalize this before the end of his term. How do you think this issue will play out?
Yes, this is a very important development right now. Seoul and the United States have agreed to move on to the next stage of operational control transfer. And if that goes well next year, the two presidents can set the final transfer date. And it would make a historic shift from the U.S.-led command to a truly combined one between the two countries, where a Korean four-star general take the lead in wartime operation. And I believe this does not weaken the alliance. It shows a more balanced and mature relationship based on shared responsibility and strong trust. The United States will provide coordination and strategic assets, while South Korea takes the greater responsibility in its own defense. But there are also challenges as well. So even after the transfer, the United States will keep far stronger intelligence and also surveillance capability on North Korea and other neighboring countries such as Russia and China. So the real issue will be how South Korea can lead the operation effectively under this informational gap. And so this will require very careful planning, better information sharing, and strong joint exercise to make the system work.
I see. And on defense costs, Seoul and Washington agreed to raise South Korea's defense spending to 3.5% of the country's GDP by 2035. What's your take on this?
Okay. Also, this is a very meaningful step for South Korean defense capability. And Seoul and Washington agreed to raise Korean defense budget from about 2.3% of GDP now to up to 3.5% by 2035. And this is almost a 50% increase. It shows Korea is taking more responsibility for its own defense, not just relying on the United States. The extra funds will mostly go to drone system, missile defense, and also our own defense system against North Korean nuclear threats. Of course, some will be spent for purchasing American weapon system, the state-of-the-art weapon system such as F-35 fighter jet. But still, this is not just about stronger defense. As Seoul spends more, I think the United States will expect Korea to take more active role in regional security, such as deterring China and handling tension over the Taiwan Strait and also West Sea. And I think this could put Korea in a tough situation between Washington and Beijing. So I strongly believe that this increasing budget will be good for Korean defense, but it also calls for a careful diplomacy to manage new strategic pressure from neighboring countries and to avoid any possible conflict with China and Russia.
Absolutely. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Che, thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
In other news, Russia announced it held talks with North Korea in Pyongyang to discuss the further development of bilateral cooperation. Now, according to the Russian Defense Ministry on Saturday, Deputy Defense Minister Viktor Goremakin and North Korean Defense Minister Do Kwang-chul discussed advancing bilateral cooperation between their respective armed forces. Grammy underscored that the fraternal relations between Russia and North Korea are actively expanding across many areas, including military cooperation. A Russian delegation was in Pyongyang from last Wednesday to Friday for talks. Following last week's discussion on greenhouse gas reduction target proposals, the government and the ruling Democratic Party have set a figure ahead of the submission to the United Nations next week. The ruling bloc have also decided to lower taxes on income earned from stock dividends. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin has the details.
The government and ruling Democratic Party have reached a consensus on South Korea's 2035 greenhouse gas reduction targets. A high-level policy consultation meeting on Sunday was attended by Prime Minister Kim Min-seok, leader of Democratic Party Jung Cheong-rae, and Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik. At the meeting, the target for reducing South Korea's greenhouse gas emission under its 2035 nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement was set at the 53% to 61% range.
For a sustainable future, reducing national greenhouse gas emissions is a task that can no longer be postponed.
The government had presented two final candidate plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions last week, by either 50 to 60% or 53 to 60%, compared to 2018 levels by 2035, replacing the current target of a 40% reduction by 2030. Through this meeting, the upper limit has been raised by 1 percentage point, a move interpreted as showing the government's stronger commitment to reducing carbon emissions. Civil society groups had called for a 65% reduction, while industry representatives proposed a 48% reduction. The government and ruling party pledged to seek additional support to ease the burden on industries through measures such as the KGX Green Transition Strategy to support Korean companies in transitioning to decarbonized industries and to foster the growth of a greener society. The final target range will be approved by the Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth and the Cabinet this week, before submission to the UN next week. Other items on the agenda included tax relief measures aimed at sustaining the recent rise in the Kospi Stock Index. The ruling bloc agreed to lower the top tax rate for dividend income from 35% to 25%, in an effort to strengthen shareholder value and reduce the tax burden for income earned from stock dividends. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to esports, South Korea's T1 has made history by clinching its third straight League of Legends World Championship title on Sunday. In an all-Korean final held in Chengdu, China, the team led by legendary captain Lee Sang-hyuk, known as Faker, defeated KT Roaster in a tight 3-2 match. Sunday's win also marks T1's 6th World Championship victory overall since 2013. No team has won more world titles than T1. And it's been about a month since the Korean government officially joined the Hague Adoption Convention, which aims to protect the rights of child adoptees. Our correspondent Park Gun-woo recently sat down with one of them, whose search for his birth parents here continues.
Even after 5 decades, for some people, the search for their birth parents continues. 57-year-old Park Won-il, also known as Philip Peloshu, was sent to an orphanage in Korea just 3 days after birth and adopted at the age of 3. Although he says he grew up in a loving family in the U.S., Park said he sometimes faced difficulties.
I really didn't feel like I fit in. You know, Colorado at that time, and even today, I think is mostly Caucasian. You know, I kind of stood out like a sore thumb in that sense. So.
That's why he always wondered about its roots and has tried every possible means to find them.
All the DNA tests that I can, and then the other thing is I try to collect all the documentation I can. Got these pictures from the adoption agency, and these were pictures of me, you know, that were presumably sent to my adoptive parents, so that they could, you know, identify the child that they were getting.
During his search, he's managed to gather bits and pieces of information about his birth, including his name, assumed birthday, and even an address in Seoul of the custodian who sent him to an orphanage. While some pieces of information about him gave him hope, he says in most cases it ultimately led to nothing.
where you get some piece of information, you start getting your hopes up, and then it turns out to not go anywhere. And that's why I feel like many times I'm on a roller coaster of emotions in terms of this search.
Fortunately, he hasn't been alone in this journey, as organizations like Korea-U.S have been there alongside him, helping him find related documents and communicate in Korean, a language he doesn't speak. Korea-U.S has also been working hard for decades to raise awareness and advocate for better laws protecting adoptees' rights, saying there's still much more that needs to be done.
Normally, when you visit a local office or access the internet, you can easily get a family relations certificate without anyone's permission. But that's not the case for them, as their information is often incomplete. That needs to be restored so that they can find them with just a single click.
As the government also announced last month that Korea has become a contracting party to the Hague Intercountry Adoption Convention, following an official apology for those who have suffered, more governmental support could follow. That comes as there are known to be around 170,000 people adopted abroad since the Korean War. But alongside these measures, Park says he wants to focus on continuing his search as he is getting older, as well as his biological parents. His final words, if he finally gets to meet them, were these.
I've lived long enough that I recognize, life works in mysterious ways, and that I harbor no ill feelings or ill will towards whatever circumstance my birth parents might have been in that had them give me up for adoption. I want to kind of complete, for my own completeness, to understand where I came from, and I hope that they're not afraid to come forward.
박건우, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choo Ji-hyun, and this is the world now. A powerful super typhoon has slammed into the Philippines, forcing nearly 1 million people to evacuate and killing at least 2. Super Typhoon Fung-wong made landfall late on Sunday night in Aurora Province on Luzon, with winds of 185 kilometers per hour and gusts up to 230 kilometers per hour. By early Monday, it had weakened slightly, but continued to pound Luzon with torrential rain and destructive winds. Authorities warn of life-threatening storm surges and floods. Airports in the area are closed and nearly 300 flights have been canceled. The storm comes just days after Typhoon Galmegi hit the Philippines, killing more than 200 people. Authorities say Typhoon Fung-wong will move northwest through Monday before heading to Taiwan midweek. In the UK, the BBC's 2 top executives have resigned following a backlash over how the network edited a speech by U.S. President Donald Trump. Director General Tim Davie and new CEO Deborah Turnus announced their resignations on Sunday, saying they take full responsibility over a documentary on the 2021 Capitol riot. The documentary edited a section of Trump's speech, putting together 2 parts of the speech that were actually more than 50 minutes apart, sparking accusations of bias. Both leaders said they're stepping down to protect the broadcaster's credibility. The British government has pledged to help BBC restore public trust as it searches for new leadership. In Brazil, a powerful tornado has torn through a town in the south of the country, killing at least 6 people and injuring hundreds, just as the country prepares to host the UN Climate Summit. The storm hit late Friday with winds reaching 250 kilometers an hour, destroying about 90% of Rio Bonito do Iguaçu in Paraná State, home to 14,000 residents. Authorities say more than 750 people were injured and rescue teams are still searching for missing. The state governor has declared 3 days of mourning, and President Lula has ordered emergency aid to the region. The disaster struck just before Brazil hosts the UN Climate Summit COP30, which is scheduled to begin on Monday in the northern port city of Belém. Lady Gaga and Kendrick Lamar lead this year's Grammy nominations as K-pop earns its first ever spot in the Songs of the Year category. Lamar tops the 2026 list with 9 nominations, including Album of the Year for GNX, while Gaga follows with 7 for her electro-pop record Mayhem. 2 K-pop tracks, Rosé and Bruno Mars' Apathy and Huntrix's Golden, made with their inclusion in the main song category. It's also the first time that 3 rap albums appear on the Album of the Year shortlist. Winners will be announced in Los Angeles on February 1st, 2026.
It's already tough to get moving on a Monday morning, and the cold air is making it even harder. Once again, we saw a sharp drop in temperatures at the start of new week, and some of the inland areas and mountainous regions saw frost and thin ice forming due to cold air flowing in from the north. Tomorrow morning will be even colder, with Seoul dropping to around 3 degrees Celsius, but this round of cold spell will not last long. By tomorrow afternoon, temperatures will begin to rise, and on college entrance exam day on Thursday, conditions will be milder than seasonal average, so there's no exam day cold wave this year. And for this afternoon, Seoul gets up to only 11 degrees Celsius, Gwangju, Daegu topping out at 14 degrees under sunny skies nationwide, along with strong winds. The weather outlook for this week looks promising with fairly sunny skies in most parts of Korea. Make sure to dress in layers and take care with the big temperature swings.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
거북목 진짜 저 필요해요.
실제로?
네, 그럼 뭐 축구할 때도 막 이렇게 많이 뛰잖아요.
사람이
의자에 앉으실 때에는 더 장력이 강하게 작용이 될 거예요.
어때요?
우와! 다녀오겠습니다. 밥 먹고 가라! 거의 그 느낌이야, 지금.
어깨가 올라가네요.
자신감이 있고.
깨방이.
13.77. 13kg의 당김의 힘으로 어깨를 펴준다는 건데.
Need a miracle for that straight spine? Here comes your solution. Snap, snap, bang. Shoulders open wide, spine angle revive. Perfect S-line transformation complete. And smartphone addicts, pay attention. That posture racing towards a neck disc, stop right there. Just putting on this hat instantly saves you from text neck disaster.
정과했을까 이런 장난 재미없을까 이제 나도 모르겠어 I don't know what you think about but you are good by you 아름다운 날 보내기는 싫어 그럴 수만 있다면
제주 영어 교육 도시의 중심 NLCS 제주에서 세계 명문대 출신 엘리트 교사진과 해외 커리큘럼으로 전 세계 상위 1%의 학사 성과를 달성하고 있으며 졸업생들은 세계 최정상급 대학으로 진학하고 있습니다. 전인적인 성장과 함께 꿈을 찾아가는 특별한 교육의 가치. 글로벌 동문 네트워크로 계속됩니다. NLCS 제주가 명문대 진학의 길을 열어갑니다.
Optimal industrial infrastructure, convenient transportation infrastructure, key secondary battery cluster, future industries, a center for marine tourism, livable residential environment, an investment hub for a better future, Gwangyang Bay Area Free Economic Zone.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, November 10th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Brooke.
Hello, happy Monday.
Happy Monday, and also Julie's with us.
Good morning and happy Monday.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So it's Monday and the start of another work week with new deadlines and back-to-back meetings. It's easy to get caught up in our daily routines and forget to think about the bigger picture. But today, let's pause for a moment and tackle one of those bigger, deeper life questions that we sometimes do want to avoid. Not to call both of you guys out, but both of you guys are currently unmarried.
Yes.
So I'm curious. So how much does the idea of getting older play into your life decisions? For instance, do you think having a family is something necessary to prepare for as you get older, Brooke?
Well, don't worry about making that comment because I am about to get that comment from my family. I'm going to go back to the U.S. for Thanksgiving, and I already know I'm going to get many questions about whether I'm dating or not, when am I going to get married, when am I going to have children, because of course my family really just wants me to experience that next step in life. And honestly, I want to experience it too. I would like to get married and have children, but it's a very personal choice, and I don't want to settle. I want to make sure that all of the circumstances are right, and I also want to make sure that my future children have a happy, loving, stable home before that happens. So until then, until I can provide that, whether it's by myself as a single mother or with a partner, I just want to wait and make the decision for myself. And I think that everyone, that the preparation that you need to have a family is just to make sure that you yourself feel secure and ready in that decision.
I think it's funny, no matter which country you live in, no matter which culture you're from, those questions of when are you getting married, same questions we get too.
They say that during Chuseok too.
Exactly.
Everyone's going to ask those questions.
What about you, Julian?
Yeah, well, just like we mentioned, it's a very hard question to answer. And with my own personal life decisions, I really do focus on building myself to build a better future for myself, whether it's through my hobby, my own career, careers, or even just building a dependable community, I feel I do pretty much whatever I can to enrich my life. I feel by this way, whether I decide to have a family or not, I think going through the process of actually becoming a better version of myself every day, building that foundation up, I feel that's the best way to prepare for a family and also just to in general have a good life for yourself. So I really do think it's really important to invest in your well-being and your future, your health, because I don't know if I want to have children or not, but I feel these investments in my life is important whether I decide to have family or not.
That's a really good point.
Right, spoken like a true responsible adult. So
Thank you.
So not only are people's ideas of what a family looks like changing, but the very question of whether you even need a family at all is now up for debate. And for those who choose to remain single, to others forming families in unconventional ways, the definition of family is evolving faster than ever. So for a closer look at what we'll be discussing today, let's take a look at the screen.
When we think of adoption, most of us picture adults making the big decision to bring a young child or even an infant into their family. But in Korea, a different kind of adoption is gaining attention. It's called adult adoption, where grown individuals are legally brought into new families. Behind this emerging trend are deeply personal stories, from elderly individuals looking for someone to carry on the family name to adults seeking emotional bonds or legal security in later life. Today on News Generation, we're taking a closer look at what adult adoption looks like here in Korea, why some people are choosing it, and we'll also be sharing our own thoughts on this growing social phenomenon.
So as we just saw in the video, adult adoption is becoming a growing topic of interest here in Korea, with motivations that range from very practical reasons to deeply emotional ones. At first, it might sound a bit unconventional or even a little hard to understand, but once you hear the real stories behind it, the people, their circumstances, and what led them to make that particular decision, your perception, like mine did, might start to change. So to start us off, Brooke, can you share an example that really brought public attention to this issue, maybe a well-known case of adult adoption here in Korea?
Yes, I certainly can. It recently became a hot topic after a well-known Korean celebrity couple, Jin Tae-hyun and Park Si-eun, decided to adopt 2 adult daughters. They first met them while volunteering at an orphanage and decided to become their legal parents, even though the girls had reached adulthood. And in fact, this couple in the past had already previously adopted one university-age daughter back in 2019, whom they met through volunteer work. And that daughter's legal adoption process was completed, and she even took her mother's surname, which I think is a really beautiful symbol that they had truly become a family, not just in spirit, but also legally and by name. And I think cases like these really challenge the typical barriers to adoption that occur in Korea, such as Confucian values that emphasize bloodlines and family heritage. In fact, the couple posted a comment about that on their social media and responded to it, saying that they want to sort of go against that message and focus on the connection that they have between people. It's not about age, it's about the importance of providing care and support to those in need. And I think that is a wonderful message. I really support them.
And I really think I saw that family and a variety show, and really it stood up to me. And so that story about that celebrity couple really captured public attention, not just because of their celebrity status, but because of the sincerity behind their decision. So actor Jin Tae-hyun actually responded to criticism that he actually got, asking why he didn't just sponsor his adopted daughters instead of adopting her. And he said sharing a meal together as a family has more meaning than a simple sponsorship, which really speaks to his belief on what makes a true family. In addition to publicly adopting a college student, like Brooke mentioned, in 2019, he and his wife counts 2 more young women who are a marathon runner and a nursing student in Jeju as family. And although they haven't gone through the legal process yet for them, they already live together as a family. But interestingly, it's not just celebrity cases that are sparking conversations about adult adoption. There are also some very personal, ordinary stories that have touched people deeply. So can you tell us more about that, Julian?
Yeah, like it just isn't just celebrity adoption stories that touch people. There are also personal and ordinary stories that that really stand out and capture people's attention. For example, back in 2023, a book called I Adopted a Friend was published, and the author shares their experience with adoption, specifically adult adoption. So the author, who has been living in the countryside, met a friend 4 years younger in a similar situation and eventually began living together. And to become their legal guardian, the author adopted this friend as an adult. Now, the trend is clearly getting people to question what it really means to be family and how families can also come in different shapes as well. And that's why I think it's really resonating and it's really sparking this conversation with some people. It gets people to really think what it actually means to be family, and it really gets people to get out of that traditional bubble and really question what a family means.
So that story actually sounds quite appealing for people who may not want to get married but still want someone to rely on, a companion or a friend they can trust in old age or when they're sick. And in Korea, the process for adult adoption is actually much simpler than for child adoption. So while child adoption goes through agencies and strict screening to make sure it's in the best interest of the child, adult adoption requires consent from both sides and just court approval. But why is this sparking conversation not just in Korea but across the world, Julian?
Yeah, so this conversation is being sparked all across the world because the concept itself is relatively new and people want to better understand what it means. Specifically, what does adult adoption mean for families? So in the past, adult adoption usually meant registering someone as an adopted child to continue the family line or to basically adopt the spouse of the child in a remarried family. In Korea, continuing the family lineage and passing down the family name has been traditionally extremely very important. So in the case where a family has no children, they sometimes adopt like a nephew to pass down the family name. And people can also choose to adopt not just for these traditional family values, but also for business too. For example, in Japan, they actually have the highest rate of adult adoption, largely for the purpose of continuing family business. But current reasons and cases for adult adoption represent a choice to truly become just family. Lineage, inheritance, and family business are not just the major reasons behind adult adoption anymore. Connection and building family is primarily one of the biggest reasons why adult adoption is a thing now.
And that's really interesting. It shows how strong the image of child adoption still is in most societies. And it also makes sense because a lot of people tend to view adoption mainly as a way to raise a child, not as a way to create a relationship between adults. But I imagine adult adoption has existed in some form before, even if for different reasons like inheritance or family lineage. So how was adult adoption typically used in the past, Brooke?
Right. So historically, adult adoption existed mainly as a legal and a social tool rather than an emotional one. Like Julian mentioned, in many societies, especially Japan and parts of Europe, families adopted adults in order to secure inheritance or continue their family line or preserve family businesses when there were no biological heirs. That doesn't sound very warm and fuzzy, right? But now it's different. And I think some people do still find the concept to be unfamiliar because traditionally when people think of adoption, they think of a baby. They think of a very young child. And it's actually very sad to talk about because, in fact, most adoptive parents prefer younger children. And statistics show that once a child turns just three, the chance of being adopted drops very sharply, which again is a really heartbreaking thing to think about because you're still a child at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you know, I think that more people, I hope that they can see that there is value in adopting people of all ages. And so I think adult adoption kind of stands out in our minds because it goes against the expectation that we have of it being a child. But again, as we keep saying, adoption shouldn't be just about age. It's about who you are choosing to bring into your family.
So all this really shows how the meaning of adult adoption has evolved over time. In the past, it was about practical legal reasons, continuing the family name or managing inheritance, but now it seems to be shifting towards something much more emotional and personal. So it's all about choosing to become family, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. And that reminds me, in the case of that celebrity couple we talked about earlier, they also spoke quite openly about why they decided to adopt their adult daughter. So Brooke, can you tell us a bit more about what they said and why people today might be turning to adult adoption?
Yes, I read a really heartwarming quote from them, actually. They said that our daughters may be adults now, but they still have many important moments ahead, like finding jobs, getting married, and building their lives. And we wanted to be there as parents to support them through it. I think that is really a beautiful sentiment that reminds us that, yes, parents are crucial when we are children and teenagers, but you never stop needing your parents, right? I'm in my 30s now, and I still call them all the time whenever I need any help. I have medical professionals in my family, so if I ever have a medical issue, I call them. Legal issues, you know, I think you can rely on your family in a variety of different ways. And so it doesn't stop when you turn 18. I think you always need that sense of love and support.
I can relate to it too. I have to say, I think my mom is still like my best friend. She knows like everything about me. So I agree. Family isn't just for childhood, but something we continue to need and rely on throughout our entire lives. And in a way that really broadens how we think about family. It's not just emotional support, but also about having someone who can be there for you in practical, even legal ways when it matters the most. But speaking of that, I heard that in the case of the person who adopted a friend that you, Julian, mentioned earlier, there was also a very real practical reason behind that decision. So can you tell us more about what happened?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier about the author who adopted a friend, it was also out of need for a family. The two had been living in the countryside for over about 5 years, caring for each other as pretty much a de facto family. However, when one of them suddenly had to go to the emergency room for emergency purposes, they faced limitation because they were not a legal family. So the only way to become each other's legal guardian was through adoption. So they chose that route. And I honestly think there should be different legal unions that should be allowed in Korea, because in this case, adult adoption was pretty much the only choice to secure their family legally, especially in these type of situations where they're at an emergency room. And these type of cases will get people to think about not just adult adoption, but also broader family structures and what that could possibly mean legally.
You know, I actually saw an interview that the writer did, and she said how she hopes that her example could be an example for other people to find courage to do that as well. So I think I actually sent a link to this article to my best friend, who's also a reporter here at Arirang, and because I feel like it's such a good option.
I would do it with my best friend too.
Exactly. Right? So it's touching that they found a way to formalize a relationship already built on genuine care and trust, and at the same time, it really highlights how important the legal side of family can be. So even when two people live like family, the system doesn't always recognize that. In those cases, adult adoption can fill that gap. So it's one way to navigate a society that still tends to define family in very traditional legal terms. And we also wanted to hear what you think about this. So we asked our viewers on the Arirang News YouTube channel, how do you feel about adult adoption as a way of becoming a family? So let's take a look at some of the responses. So the clear majority, 61%, viewed it positively, while 14% saw it in a more negative light. Meanwhile, 25% said they weren't quite sure. So it's actually not too surprising that the majority viewed it positively. These days, a lot of people can relate to the idea that it might actually feel easier and even more comfortable to build a life with close friends rather than enter into a marriage. Like I personally would I think rethink about marriage in general if this was more like common, I guess, and easier. And with adult option, there's also that sense of security. You don't have to worry about the legal side of things, since it gives that relationship an official recognition. So we're also going to hear from a young person from Germany about her thoughts on adult adoption. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Anna, originally from Germany, where adult adoption also exists, and now she's living here in Korea. So hi Anna, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello everybody, nice to meet you.
So how common is adult adoption in Germany? How is it generally viewed by society?
Well, in Germany it is legal, but still not very common. I think there are quite a few of cases where people adopt their nieces or nephews when they actually have raised them. So I think adoptions within the family are quite normal if it reflects a parent-child relationship. But in general, I think a lot of people get suspicious when it looks like a way to arrange inheritance or corporate succession. So I think it depends on whether it's within the family or not.
Right, that makes sense. And thank you for joining us today. My next question for you is, what are some of the main reasons people choose adult adoption in Germany? And can you share a few of those cases?
I think I guess the main reason is actually to legalize the family bond, especially when they actually have raised the children, but also for succession. Actually, there's a quite famous case when I was younger. It was all around the media. So in Germany, we don't have a legal, like a royal family anymore, but there's still former noble families, which also carry the title of a prince or a princess. And there was the case of a princess who adopted a son who was back then 38 years old. And he actually became the Prince of Anhalt. Anhalt is the name of a federal state in Germany. And he then started adopting young men in their 20s and 30s. Which were all then carrying the name of the title of a prince. So that was actually quite a big issue in Germany. And it also, there was a big public debate about the commercial use of adoption laws, because he later also said he actually got some money of some of his adopted sons. So I think because of that, in general, in Germany, they're also quite suspicious about adoptions, sorry.
Yeah, great. So just to wrap things up, I have two questions for you. One, what is your personal thought on adult adoption? And two, would you ever do it yourself?
Actually, I have been thinking about it when I first came to Korea, because I have been living here now for 12 years. And when I was in my 20s, I came here and started living with a Korean family. So I also have a Korean surname, which I use as a stage name. And I call my Korean parents Appa, 엄마, so dad and mom. And we have been living together for more than 10 years. And I actually considered adoption because of two reasons. One is the visa, because in Korea it's quite difficult to stay here, even though I call it my home now. I think because of legal issues, it's always very difficult to get a visa. And then there was one incident, I still remember I was going out and my phone ran out of battery. And my Korean dad was super anxious, and he was so worried. And that day he said he was so worried because even though he calls the police and says something happened to my daughter, because they really think of me as a daughter, he cannot do anything because I'm not his legal daughter. So that was a moment where I actually thought I would be good to have that family bond legally. But then, I mean, these days it's fine with my visa. And I think it was a big step also to my German parents to actually say, okay, I get adopted, even though I have a very happy family in Germany. I think that was the reason I then didn't decide to do it. But I actually know a lot of friends who struggle with visa and found a family here in Korea who are also thinking about being adopted.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your personal stories on this. I think it really broadens people's perspectives on how different circumstances can impact people's decisions about this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just talked to a young person from Germany about how adult adoption is viewed there and how it compares to what we're seeing here in Korea. It's interesting to see how ideas about what makes a real family can vary, and even across generations within the same country. So here in Korea too, younger people seem to be redefining what family means beyond just marriage or blood ties. So Brooke, do you think younger generations see family differently from older generations?
I do, and actually there was a survey that showed that 7 out of 10 MZs in Korea believe that if you live together, your family, which reflects how the traditional idea of family is changing. Unfortunately, however, in Korea, there is no current legal framework that allows non-married adults to officially become family, which is different from other countries. For example, in the U.S., we have something called common law marriage, which means that if you're living together for a certain period of time, you can be recognized legally as being married without any formal ceremony. Again, Korea doesn't have that system yet, but there is this Living Partnership Act that has been suggested to the National Assembly several times. So if that were to pass, then I think that adult adoption might become less necessary as sort of a legal workaround for chosen families.
But there's a lot of different systems that could come in place, and it's really telling, shows how much of our understanding of family has evolved. So like Brooke said, so South Korea does recognize common law marriages, but they're more referred to as de facto marriages rather than the common law marriage in the Western sense. So once it's recognized, this type of relationship can grant some legal rights, but there are still important limitations such as tax benefits and most importantly, spousal legal rights, which includes medical decision making. So generally, which though still generally require official marriage registration. So while it's recognized socially and partially legally, it still doesn't offer the full protections of a registered marriage, which is why people have considered alternatives like adult adoption and are calling for partnership law to fill in those gaps. So in Korea, what kinds of options do people have if they want to be recognized as legal guardians without being related by blood or marriage, Julian?
Yeah, so it's just under Korean law, there is just no proper way for people to be related, whether it's other than just marriage and blood, but through legally. And just like Brooke has mentioned, there are some countries that have a domestic partnership law, and similar legislation has been repeatedly proposed in Korea as well. If such a law existed, adult adoption might actually be considered unnecessary. And there are couples out there who don't want to get married, who don't, or maybe not be ready to get married immediately. So I think some kind of partnership law could be really beneficial. These limitations are not very good, especially people who want to consider how they want to build their family. So I believe that everyone deserves to have some kind of legal protection and be able to have the freedom to choose how to build their family.
I agree. So in the end, adult adoption shows that family can take many different forms, whether it's through blood, law, or simply mutual care. What people are really looking for is connection and belonging. For many who don't want to be married but still want stability or someone to rely on later in life, having options like these can be incredibly freeing. A reminder that security and love don't have to fit one model. And as our society changes, maybe it's time our systems catch up with the many ways people choose to define family today. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation, but News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 in Korea time with more stories and discussions. Big thanks to Brooke.
Thanks for having me.
And also Julian.
Thank you for having me today.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have the best day. We are
News Generation.